According to science, when the universe was young and very small, smaller than an atom, we know that matter could not exist, and all there was this primordial energy from which all future matter would be created. Science tells us that matter and energy were combined and undifferentiated. What about Torah? What does it say? The same thing. Let's pretend it's 1,000 years ago. Let's see what the Torah says. It says that the first thing that appeared was light. Isn't that a little like putting the cart before the horse? Think about being someone 1,000 years ago being told that the first thing that would appear at the beginning of the universe was light. And then a few days later, the sources of light would be created, the sun and the moon and the stars. Does this seem a little ridiculous? Who would buy this? But what do we know now? The Big Bang Theory tells us that the universe started off at a size smaller than an atom. At this size, matter could not exist, just the primordial energy that would later form it. There was also the cosmic background radiation, which was everywhere and of very high energy. That energy would expand with the expanding universe and reduce its strength. As this energy weakened and the universe expanded, something interesting happened. It became visible light. It didn't come from a sun or a star, it was just there, everywhere at once. At precisely this time, the radiation became weak enough that it would not be able to blow atoms apart. Matter, which is dark, and light came into existence at that moment together. Eyes looking at this, at that time, would have seen a sudden visible flash of light coming from everywhere. And matter, dark stuff, separating from it. The first thing that appeared before stars and before sun and before the moon was visible light according to the Big Bang Theory, and separate dark matter. Dark stuff. Torah and science seem to be in agreement. The scientific conclusions are now inescapable. The universe had a beginning, light was created first, and matter formed out of non-matter. Let's move on to day 2. Day 2, as viewed from the beginning, corresponds to the next 4 billion years of universe history looking backward. The Torah reads, God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate between water and water." So God made the firmament and separated between the waters which were beneath the firmament and waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. God called to the firmament heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. Schroeder proposes an explanation for the second day, but I find it somewhat unsatisfying, so I will propose my own. Torah scholars say all this talk of separation refers to a separation between two parts of reality, the physical world and spiritual, unseen dimensions. So Judaism says there are unseen dimensions to our universe. Unseen dimensions are hidden from our world but connected to our dimensions of reality. Let's understand what we mean by dimensions. A dimension in science means a direction. How many directions can we go in our world? Up and down is one direction. Side to side is 2. Forward and backward is a third direction. That's 3 dimensions. Is there a fourth? Well, there is. We are moving forward in time. That's a 4th dimension. Is there a backwards in time? Of course there is. We've been there. But it's cut off to us. We cannot go there now. Could there be other dimensions that are cut off to us? The Torah says there was a separation and differentiation that developed between the physical, visible dimensions of reality and other hidden dimensions. What does science say about the dimensions of our universe? Just to add a few numbers to keep in the back of your mind, Torah scholars are always aware of numerical quantities in the Torah. Religious observers agree that there are some numbers which are particularly important with respect to creation. The number 1, there is one God. The number 4, there are 4 letters to God's name, the Yud and the He and the Vav and the He. The number 10, there are 10 expressions to creation. God said, "Let there be light." God said, "Let there be luminaries." the phrase "let there be" occurs 10 times. And finally, the number 26, which is the numerical value of God's name. In Hebrew, each letter also represents a number. A yud represents 10, a hey 5, a vav another 6, and finally a hey 5 for a total of 26. Okay, so let's look for an explanation from science for that second day. In science, we have always tried to look for basic fundamental truths. We have looked for the basic building blocks of matter. Originally, science identified atoms as the basic building blocks of all matter. The word atom in fact means indivisible in Greek. A few decades later, we found the atom was in fact made of something that was even smaller. We found that the atom had a nucleus which was made of protons and neutrons, and circling electrons. And we thought, oh, these are the basic building blocks of matter, the proton, the neutron, and the electron. Science loves theories that are simple and explain a lot, and this seemed to work. However, since then, we have come up with a lot more fundamental particles. In fact, there could be over 30 of these now. This doesn't sound so fundamental anymore. Once a theory is this complicated, we need to look for newer, simpler ones. Here's the simpler model. It's called string theory. Here is a very simplified version of how it might work. Let's say that everything in the universe is in fact built from something smaller and more basic than those so-called fundamental particles. What they imagined was a string-like thing, a vibrating loop, and it's smaller than all of those fundamental particles. Now how can that string vibrate? Well, it could vibrate back and forth, side to side, up and down, or maybe even backward and forward in time. Each vibrating state of the string would correspond to one of those fundamental particles. However, there are not enough dimensions or directions for the string to vibrate in to create unique states of vibrating strings and make all those fundamental particles. We needed more directions for the string to vibrate in. So scientists imagined that there might be more dimensions, or directions for the string. But we don't see any other directions. Each of these other directions would have to be incredibly small for us not to see them. How many more dimensions? They looked at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 dimensions. Not enough. But 10 dimensions. That worked mathematically. You can make all of the particles by vibrating a string in 10 different directions. One problem though. They forgot about time, which was another direction. That makes 11. So 11 should work, right? Not quite. It appears that a stable universe can only form if there are an even number of dimensions. Otherwise, the math shows that the whole thing collapses and disappears. And we're still here. So on we go. 12, 14, 16, 18 dimensions don't work. 20, 22, 24 are also not mathematically stable. But 26. Yes, it works. 26 dimensions, which includes the time dimension, works perfectly. A 26-dimensional universe is stable, has 10 primary dimensions in which the string will vibrate to produce all of the different matter and energy particles we know about. The idea of mysterious strings vibrating in directions we can't see is only one of a number of theories of our universe, and it has several variations, so it may not be the whole story. However, it does work mathematically, and it does make sense. So let's now apply this to our theory of the universe. The story goes that when our universe was smaller than an atom, there were 26 equal and distinct directions a vibrating string could go. For some reason, 4 of them, 3 of space and 1 of time, started to expand rapidly, while the others did not expand much at all, and are in the same size that they were near the start of the universe. These 4 dimensions became different from the others, because they were expanding, but still interact with the other dimensions. Sound familiar? A separation of physical dimensions. String theory and day 2 of the Torah tell us the same thing. What caused the sudden and rapid expansion of our 4 dimensions? No one knows. Scientists can theorize about a powerful anti-gravity force in the universe. This was a one-time, brief event that took the universe from the size, comparatively, of a grapefruit to the size of the solar system in under 1 second, and would never occur again. Schroeder observes the phrase in Genesis 1:2, which says, "The divine presence hovered over the waters." No one knows what it means, but it is believed to mean that there was a one-time event in the forming of the universe that would never again be repeated, as this phrase is never again repeated in the Torah. Sounds kind of the same. 4 expanding dimensions are different and separating from the others. There's a clear parallel here in the separation at an early stage of the universe between the physical dimensions and hidden dimensions that affect and interact with them. If anyone has been keeping count, we have one universe with 4 rapidly expanding dimensions, 10 primary dimensions in which all of the particles of matter are created, and 26 dimensions in total. Strange how the same numbers keep coming up. Let's move on to day 3. This is the next 2 billion years, looking backwards. What was going on at that time? The Torah states, "Let the waters beneath the heaven be gathered, and let dry land appear. Let the earth sprout vegetation a 3rd day." Later, commentary on Genesis states that the way the waters formed and separated from the land is that a mist ascended from the earth and watered the whole surface of the soil. This for many years was contrary to science's view that the clouds rained down from the skies, creating the bodies of water. However, we now know that science has changed its view based on new information. Schroeder describes modern science theory behind this as follows. The Earth, when formed, was a dry, rocky planet with lots of volcanic activity. There was not enough water vapor in the early atmosphere to condense and form the oceans. Molten lava, however, from volcanoes had a huge amount of water dissolved in it. When it came to the surface, the steam released produced water for the life-supporting oceans. Science's explanation has changed and now mirrors Torah. So if we accept this new view from science, science and Torah agree that the earth's water arose from within the earth. Oceans formed from the water that rose up. The same thing.